Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Good morning and welcome to the April 13th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Treaty 4 Saskatchewan territory, territory signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan, parts of Alberta and Manitoba, and the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. The City of Regina owes its strength and vibrancy to these lands and the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory, as well as settlers from around the world who continue to be welcomed here and call Regina home. Some members of the committee and city administration are attending the meeting today through video conferencing. I would like to remind those members of the following. Please ensure that your video camera and microphone are turned off. If a member of committee wishes to speak, use the raised hand function to be placed into a speaking queue. When speaking, remember to unmute your microphone and enable your video camera, and all votes will be conducted with a recorded vote. Delegations will be attending the meeting today in person and through teleconferencing to address the committee on different items on the agenda. Reports will be considered by City Council at its meeting scheduled for April 20th, and the deadline to register as a delegation for the City Council meeting is 1 p.m. on Thursday, April 14th. Can I have someone move a motion to approve the agenda at the call of the chair? Thanks,
so move, Roshan.
Thanks, Councillor LeBlanc. I will call to question. Any opposed? Carried. Can I have someone move a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the meeting held on March 23rd and the special meeting on March 24th, 2022?
Hawkins.
Okay. Any errors or omissions? I will call the question. Any opposed? Okay, carried. We will now consider item EX 2246, supplemental the Education Property Tax Bylaw 2022. Can I ask Barry Lacey from administration to introduce the report?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So the supplemental report is really just tied to the next report that's before Council on the agenda, which is with respect to setting the property tax bylaw and education property tax bylaw. At the time that we had issued that original report, we had not yet received the rates from the separate school board. So this supplementary report basically brings those rates forward to be included in the next item's discussion.
Thank you. Can I have someone move this report with a motion to receive and file? We will be holding questions for the main report. Councillor LeBlanc. Okay, and is anyone opposed to the receive and file of this report? Okay, so that's carried, and we will now consider item EX 22-47, the Regina Property Tax Bylaw 2022 and the Education Property Tax Bylaw 2022. Can I ask Barry Lacey from administration to introduce this report?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So City Council is required to pass a bylaw annually to set mill rates and establish property subclasses and applicable mill rate factors. The purpose of this report is to collect and submit for approval the information to be used to prepare the Regina Property Tax Bylaw 2022 and the Education Property Tax Bylaw 2022. And so this is part of the procedural process to enable administration to prepare and issue the tax notices. The rates in this report and being proposed in the bylaw have been previously approved by council at previous meetings of council, or as it relates to the education tax by the province, as it relates to the education tax related to the public school boards, and the approved rates by the separate school board with respect to the education tax related to separate school boards. With that, we're seeking approval to instruct the solicitor to prepare the bylaw for council approval.
Thank you. Can I have someone move this report with the following amendment? And Tracy will put it up on the screen. So the amendment is amend Table 2, Education Property Tax Mill Rates by Property Class in Appendix A to include the mill rates for the separate Education Property Tax mill rates by property class as follows, and you'll see a graph with additional information. So I'm looking for a mover. Okay, thank you, Mayor Masters. Any questions from the members on this report? My computer went to sleep. Okay. We're just pulling up the amendment.
You should be able to see it.
Okay, so just I'll ask again if there's any questions from members on the report. Okay. Okay. Mayor Masters, would you like to close off the debate on this? Okay, then I will call the question and I will ask the clerk to start the vote. Do I need to say anything?
Through you, Madam Chair, the motion carries with all members in attendance voting in favor as follows: Councillor Hawkins, Bresciani, Findura, Mayor Masters, Councillor Stevens, LeBlanc, and Zakitniak. The following members are absent from the meeting today: Councillors Shaw, Stadnichuk, Mole, and Mancinelli.
Okay, thank you. Now we're moving on to a delegation for EX 22-48. I would like to call upon delegation Brendan Hansen and Daryl Godfrey, who are appearing in person. I'll ask you to please introduce yourselves for the record, the organization you are representing, if any, and where you live. You have 5 minutes to address Executive Committee, after which you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that the members may have for you. Go ahead. Thank you. Sorry. Okay.
My name is Brendan Hansen. I'm a real estate manager with SaskTel, and I currently reside in Regina.
And I reside in Regina as well. So thank you very much again for having us. We're here today to talk about SaskTel's 5G network in Regina. As you know, SaskTel is a Crown corporation. Our vision is to make Saskatchewan, and by extension Regina, the most connected places on the planet. So over the last decade or so, we've invested heavily in our fiber to the home, fiber to the business program, which has been very successful in creating great connectivity for Saskatchewan and Regina homes and businesses. Last year, our board and shareholder approved a $525 million program to upgrade and modernize our wireless network throughout Saskatchewan, so to 5G from our current 4G network. So we've started that process, onboarding a new vendor. Our vendor of choice is Samsung for this. So again, it's a 5-year program. We began in Regina, so we launched our initial 5G network in Regina here with a small launch of 4 sites in December last year. We've now expanded that to about, I think it's about 28 sites in Regina and a number of sites in Saskatoon as well. So that's our initial launch has been quite successful. Now we're on with the heavy work of replacing and upgrading that network throughout Saskatchewan. So we are starting again with Regina. So Regina and Saskatoon over the current fiscal year, which started April 1st, we have about 150 sites to upgrade in Regina and Saskatoon. So it's a big year for us, and then it gets even heavier as we move forward. But we believe this will once again make Regina one of the most connected cities in Canada. So we're very proud to be part of that, and we're hoping to have your support. As part of this upgrade, we do need to upgrade many of our structures, our towers that we put the equipment on. We need to add 5G equipment, so there's more radios and antennas that go on those towers. And there are a number of structures in Saskatoon and Regina that need to be actually replaced because they can't physically carry the load of that extra equipment. So we've got 4 sites that are under consideration here for you today that we need to replace. They're again, small structures that are not large enough to handle that. So we're proposing to replace them with much larger ones that will handle it, and they'll actually provide better coverage in the city as well. So you'll have better service in the areas that we're talking about here. So they're taller structures. They'll handle much more equipment. And again, it'll just provide a much better service as we move forward. So 4 sites, not sure, Brendan, do you want to go through the 4 and talk about them?
Yeah, so we're proposing 4 separate sites, 2 of them which are related to the 5G network, and then 2 that are actual net new sites. So the first one to go through is the 7th and St. John replacement. Basically, SaskTel is proposing to replace the existing 15-meter structure and purchase a small parcel of land from the city of Regina to erect a 45.7 meter tower on that piece of land. Part of the reason is SaskTel has a lot of the network equipment on that side of the road. We investigated numerous options to look at different sites to put a structure, but it was deemed that this would be the most reasonable site for a new tower. The second is the site on Courtney and Dewdney. This site will be replacing our streetlight poles just on the south side of Dewdney Avenue. Again, this SaskTel is proposing to erect a 37-meter structure with a small equipment building. It was consulted with the Airport Authority in Regina that 37 meters would be the highest height we could go at this location. Again, SaskTel consulted with numerous other constituents in the area, private landowners, and this was deemed to be the most beneficial area. One of the new sites is the Wascana View Tower just on the south side of Prince of Wales. This site, as most of you know who have lived in Regina here, it's a very residential dense area. There's very few green spaces, very few private business owners in the area to obtain land for a new tower. SaskTel did talk to one church in the area, and it was deemed that this wouldn't be a viable solution for SaskTel. So the next best option was talking with the City of Regina, and decided to move south of Prince of Wales. It less intrusive in the area and would still provide that coverage and offload on existing towers. And then the last site is the Harbor Landing site off of Aerodrome Drive. This site, again, Harbor Landing, very residential dense. However, there is a lot of business owners in the area. SaskTel did consult with one of the main partners, being Harvard Developments, and SaskTel couldn't come to an agreement or a viable solution to erect a tower in the area. So it was discussed with the city to find a solution in one of the municipal reserve pieces, and looking at a 45 meter tower with a cabinet network solution.
Sorry, we're over 5 minutes, so I don't know if you're done now or if you have a...
Good to go. Yeah.
That's good. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I see some members have questions for you. So we'll start with Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So thank you for coming forward. I do have a question in regards to the Wascana View. That is in my ward. How high is this tower? You didn't indicate that in the Wascana View. This will be a new site. What is the height there?
So the new site, it'll be a 45.7 meter structure with a small equipment building, which is 3.6 meters by 3.6 meters.
Okay. So very high. What is the engagement with residents? What's your responsibility there?
So the engagement with residents, once we get approval to proceed with consulting with the public, what SaskTel will have to do is send a notification package to every landowner within a 3 times the tower height, as well as putting a notification in, I guess, for example, in Regina, the Leader Post, outlining that SaskTel would like to erect a tower in this specific area. And that public consultation process will run for 30 days. And if any comments are received, SaskTel has 14 days to respond, and then the person who submitted the request has 21 days to respond. And then once that is concluded, SaskTel will reach out to the City of Regina for concurrence to build the tower, and then we will have to send the request into the federal government, which is Information Science and Economic Development Canada, and they will provide us approval to build the tower. And once that's done, then SaskTel can begin construction.
So you've indicated that you've built many towers and you're starting to build more across the province. What has been the general feeling when you do go into a community such as an area, well, even on a school site that you're proposing here? What has been the response usually from residents that back these towers?
So the response, I guess, as technology is growing, we're seeing a increase for the need, and the response, we're seeing a lot of comments saying that we need increased capacity and increased coverage in areas, just as everybody has a cell phone in their hand, everybody's on Netflix, everybody's streaming, we're seeing that capacity increase. Obviously, there is going to be some contentious comments that SaskTel receives. I think that's just like with anything that goes to the public. There's going to be a lot of people in favor and some people that aren't. I believe that most people would recognize that cellular service, and it's SaskTel's duty to be providing the City of Regina and the province of Saskatchewan with the best cell coverage it can provide.
I think I would add to that certainly through the pandemic, there's been an increase in support from the public for good communication services. We certainly noticed huge uptake in our services over the pandemic, so people are very very supportive of us adding capacity to our mobile networks, especially because of the pandemic.
Thank you. Do these towers, are they shared with other networks such as Rogers, TELUS, any of those? Are these shared towers, or does everybody have to put up their own tower? Because there was another one that just went up in the Greens and Gardner not too long, or is going to potentially go up in the Greens. So are they shared, or what is that? How does that process work?
So Bell and TELUS use our network in Saskatchewan. They don't build any towers here. Rogers has their own network here, but between Bell, TELUS, and ourselves, we have about over 95% of the market share in Saskatchewan. So we are carrying the vast majority of the mobile traffic in Saskatchewan. We do occasionally share towers with Rogers, and they're on some of our towers and we're on some of theirs, but typically we don't do it a lot, to be honest, because Rogers doesn't have very many towers, to be honest.
So further to that comment as well, with this 5G in Daryl's presentation there, he alluded to a lot of the equipment changes and antenna upgrades, and a lot of that is more weight on the towers. And as we have engineering companies looking at these towers, it's deemed unfeasible that we can have multiple, in some cases, to have multiple carriers on there. So for example, in your ward, we have that tower on Chuka Creek in Prince of Wales. That tower actually holds both SaskTel and Rogers equipment. However, as the technology is increasing, Rogers is looking to get off that tower and put up their own tower in Acre 21. So it's all over the place. We do look at coloing on a lot of different structures, but as we increase and technology changes, the times change, and it looks like a lot of these structures aren't able to hold these towers or this equipment.
Thank you. The tower that's on Arcola Avenue right now, that's a very tall one as well. Is that SaskTel?
Between University Park Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's SaskTel as well. And that's
SaskTel.
That's 45.7 meters.
So that's 47. Yeah, so same as one
Yep.
that's recommended here. Okay.
Right.
What is the distance? So I guess the question I ask is because this is very close to neighboring properties. When people, of course, bought this, there was a tower not going up. There's a couple of questions that have already been raised with me. One is safety. Safety to these towers. How is safety regulated? I understand federally, but how does federally actually monitor these? And has there been any research done to ensure that these towers, because it is very close to backing these homes?
Are you talking physical safety or from the radio waves?
Radio, yeah.
Right, so we abide by Safety Code 6, which is it's a federal government regulation on basically the power limits that you can transmit at. It's not much different than radio stations or TV stations. When they have towers, they transmit radio waves as well, which is the same thing. In fact, some of the frequencies we used to be radio frequencies, so we are transmitting on those same radio frequencies. There are regulations, again, under Safety Code 6, what we can transmit, the power we can transmit at, and in most cases, we are at a fraction of the maximum transmittal power, so it is deemed as quite safe.
Okay. Is there not a distance that you'd have to be away from the backyards of homes? Like, is there a regulation that these towers would have to be? And I guess with that, you indicated you checked with a church. There's also George Gordon Reserve out there. That's a little bit further out, but again, if there's development out there, at least people know what they're purchasing and where they're purchasing. Were they contacted at all?
Sorry, in terms of contacting Gordon Reserve there?
Yeah, for instead of it having the tower there, was there consideration to other landowners, which is George Gordon is right there. Was there any consultation done there with them as well?
There was no conversations held with George Gordon Reserve based on where SaskTel needed to provide the coverage and capacity. Getting that far out would SaskTel wouldn't be able to provide that coverage and capacity that we need for the area.
Yeah, just a comment on the way sort of the mobile system works. I mean, obviously there's concerns from some people that these towers are close to people. The way the system works is the closer the radio is to the devices that are using it, the better the service is. The further you are away from a tower, the worse or the lower capacity you'll get and the lower speeds you'll get. So that's the reason that we need to be as close to the devices that are using the system as possible.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Who I see next is Councillor Hawkins. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have some similar questions. The aerodrome tower is in my ward. You mentioned that you did extensive investigation before deciding on this site. Can you describe that investigation for me?
So right now, SaskTel has a tower to the south in Harbor Landing and a tower to the north. Rogers also has a tower to the north right beside our existing tower, and they also have a tower, I believe, behind Dollarama. In looking for a new tower to offload these two existing towers, SaskTel contacted Harvard Developments. SaskTel and Harvard Developments looked at various solutions within the Winners parking lots, Walmart is in that area, and we also looked at a couple rooftop solutions. Those conversations went on for numerous months, and eventually it just came to a point that SaskTel and Harvard couldn't come to a solution that would be beneficial for both parties. So after those conversations, the residential area being so dense, it was green spaces with the city that we looked at, and I believe talking with the real estate company in Regina here, we looked at a couple municipal reserves and deemed that MR9 was the most viable solution.
Further to that, what was the problem in your discussions with Harvard? Was it price?
A lot of it location. We were proposing parking lots. When looking at the sites, we didn't see the parking lots being filled, so we proposed to take up 2 or 3 parking spaces and put a tower in that area, and Harvard just wouldn't buy into that solution. And then looking behind the existing businesses there wasn't enough space to put a tower there.
There's commercial development on the north side of Harbor Landing. A number of parking lots associated with that. Did you check out any of those or any of those possibilities?
Yeah, so the further north we get, as I alluded to, we have an existing tower to the north there as well. And the closer we get between existing towers, we start to see interference, and then we lose that coverage and capacity.
I see. SaskTel has expropriation power, don't they? In the final analysis, you could expropriate land to put up towers. Am I wrong on that, or am I right?
That is true. We prefer not to do that.
And if in this case, and I'm thinking of the Harbor Landing site, which I'm familiar with, if the city were to say no because it was concerned about park space and residential space and everything else, SaskTel then decide whether or not it was going to expropriate Harvard land or city park land?
That's something we haven't come across yet, and it's something we hope we don't have to come across. We hope that we can come to agreements, whether it's a private landowner or a municipality, before we start investigating those options.
I think at the end of the day, if the city said they would not approve the location anyway, whether we own the land or not, I said typically listens to the municipality that the structure is being proposed to be built in. So if the city just said they didn't want the structure at all, then we likely wouldn't build it. So we've had that situation in other municipalities where we've gone for literally a decade now, where a portion of a city has had very, very poor wireless service because we just could not come to an agreement. We've not typically had that in Regina, and because we believe we've had a very good relationship with the city of Regina on our wireless network build. So we're hopeful to keep that great relationship going forward.
Do you have any other towers, big towers like this, immediately behind schools?
Right now, I believe we, in Regina, no. In Saskatoon, we're working out. However, have been having conversations with both the separate and public school boards, and we're seeing a lot of safety concerns with them in regards to cell coverage, and if there's an issue. Specifically, we had a site in the north there that there was an issue with at a school site, and Daryl alluded to this location previously. We didn't have that cell coverage in that area, and they had troubles calling 911, and so that concern was raised. Another piece is we have looked with these school boards at putting cellular antennas in the actual school itself to provide that coverage. However, with decreasing budgets and things that we're seeing across the board here, we're investigating an option of putting structures on school sites to provide that coverage in lieu of putting antennas in the school system.
With respect to the Harbor Landing site, have you talked to either the public or the Catholic School Board about this proposal?
So that has been discussed with both the separate and public.
And what was their response to this?
So they are in agreement with, we've discussed actual numerous sites, and they understand the need for having this cell coverage within the area, and especially within school zones, with safety being top priority. So they are in favor with working with SaskTel in providing cell service in the area.
I'd like to be a little more specific here, specifically with respect to this particular location immediately behind the school. Have they said they're in favor of having a cell tower at that location?
We haven't got an agreement specifically for this site in regards to constructing a tower on that school.
Have you asked them for an agreement on this?
We have not. We've had preliminary discussions outlining various sites within the city of Regina.
I'm going to ask a difficult question, but it's a question that I have to answer before I vote on this. Harvard has said no, you don't have an agreement with the school. You're looking at city parkland, which is very important to the city. Why would we say yes when Harvard says no and the schools haven't given you an answer?
I believe in terms of talking with Harvard, they are a separate business, a private business. Their main goal is development. We push that to have the development, and as development increases, that cellular coverage and capacity will need to be increased. With the school board, like I said, these discussions have been preliminary. Things are looking promising, and as we progress, that's something that we look to get an agreement signed with. In terms of working with the City of Regina and getting approval from the City of Regina, the City of Regina represents the people of the city, and I believe the people of the city would request and would like to have that cellular coverage and capacity. And working with the Crown Corporation of SaskTel, I believe that would be the best solution to move ahead with that.
Do you have any particular evidence for that statement?
Which statement?
Well, that you believe that the city, and in particular, I think in this case, the residents that are going to be right by this tower, that they're in favor of having a tower here as opposed to having it, say, in a parking lot, even where it might affect business by a little bit. I mean,
That's
there's
what
competing values here.
That's what we would find out during a public consultation, right?
Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Next, I see Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a follow-up to what Councillor Hawkins had mentioned. Would you be opposed to engaging with the public, at least on an informal basis, outside of the federal regulatory standards, especially with regards to the Aerodrome Road, before we proceed with this? So could we have a consultation outside the boundaries of the established regulations and then return to council with the feedback you've received from residents before we make a determination?
That's something we've done in the past, but specifically it was for specific sites, not just a general idea of SaskTel putting up towers. The discussions usually revolve around certain sites, and then discussions can be held there.
Okay, so just to be clear, if we were to kind of postpone this report and approval of this report, you'd be willing to discuss those specific sites in the consultation process, and then we could return with this report and that feedback?
Sorry, which report are you referring to?
Well, the report we're talking about right now
Okay.
on the placement, basically the selling of the land. So before we agree to sell land to SaskTel for these towers, would you be amenable to discussing this with the residents first, and we can return with that feedback before we make a decision about this?
I guess our question to you, what would that discussion look like? Would it be, and kind of the duration of that discussion? Just because we, like I said, we're rolling out 5G and we'd like to be as prompt as possible. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I also have a question from Mayor Masters. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the presentation this morning. I think what you're hearing is the concern that councillors will hear from residents, what you potentially hear from residents. Explain the process to me. If I understood you correctly, you get agreement from council on proceeding to consultation, essentially.
Correct.
That we agree and we say, okay, we just want you to go consult. You bring back, and I understand the timeframes 30, 14, 21. When you bring that back to us, have you ever had an instance where you've done public consultation and it's been so overwhelmingly negative that you've kind of abandoned all hope on a site?
So basically, if the municipal government says to ISED, the federal authority, that they do not want a structure, we don't build it. So if there is overwhelming opposition to a site, then we don't get the approval to build it because the municipality has to approve it.
So in terms of council's concerns today, if we approve the report, you proceed forward with public consultation. You have to come back to us before you build anyways.
Yes.
Yeah. So the city of Regina will have to provide us concurrence.
Yes.
And then we present that concurrence to the federal government.
Okay, so the previous, and I'll refer to Councillor Stevens' question about not approving it, but if it's approved, essentially, that doesn't mean it gets built. That means you proceed forward with your consultation,
Right.
and you're coming back to bring us back the public consultation, the public
Yes.
feedback that you've got.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Can you share with me how long you've been working on these 4 sites?
I believe working on these 4 sites, SaskTel had a presentation regarding 5G and kind of our network upgrade to a couple of constituents within the city of Regina from your planning and development teams and your real estate teams. That was back in October, and we've been working on or investigating those sites probably since early November.
Okay. What has been so far, I guess this is my question, why upgrade to 5G?
Sorry?
Why upgrade to 5G?
I can cover that one because it solves all the world's problems, poverty, hunger. Being a little facetious there, but the industry promises a lot. But basically 5G for us, it will help satisfy the insatiable need of our customers for data. The data usage continues to grow at about 30% a year on mobile networks. And from what we've heard from other parties that have upgraded to 5G, that number has gone up significantly. They've had doubling and tripling of usage when they've gone up to 5G. So it provides significantly more capacity. And then future enhancements will also incorporate huge network capacity. So things like sensors. You've maybe heard of the Internet of Things, where everything's going to be connected. Well, the 5G network, once we complete the upgrade in a year or two, it'll be able to, it'll have the capacity to handle basically millions of devices, not just your handheld devices and whatever, but sensors and all the rest of it. So millions of devices, very, high density. And then it also will incorporate ultra low latency, we call, so response time. So things like if you were doing remote surgery over a mobile network, you really can't have much delay. If somebody's operating a scalpel from Regina in to Prince Albert or something, you can't have much delay. So it'll take an order of magnitude out of the latency of the network too. So the response time. So there's some fantastic things that the industry is promising, and what we're hoping to do is build this network so that it'll enable people and businesses to improve their lives.
Thanks. And so essentially, in terms of a 30% increase in growth per year and a prediction that 5G actually sees more. Have
Bumps
you
it up.
heard from customers directly wanting, and I'm asking specifically because sometimes we get feedback on different programs and things, initiatives that we do here. And so on an ongoing basis, does Sastel quantify or collect the amount of folks that call you and tell you that their internet is too darn slow?
Oh yes. Yes, we certainly do. Certainly, if we have fiber to the home, we don't get those issues anymore. But places where we have older technology in rural areas of the province, we certainly get, we certainly, especially again because of the pandemic, when people were working at home, we got multiple comments on I need more network speed, I need more greater internet speed. Our mobile network, the usage went up absolutely dramatically during the pandemic because of course people were now working at home. So we definitely had issues there, and our network, it performed very well, but we recognize we need to keep upgrading it because again, it's not just 30% per year that we're expecting, it's a bump when we go to 5G that it'll enable a step function upward.
Once a tower is built, even if there was, let's say you engaged with 1,000 people and there were 100 that were, opposed to it, what happens over time? Do you continue to get complaints about a tower over time, or is it one of those things that kind of starts to blend into the environment?
Typically, that goes away over time. Once it's built, and typically that the residents are not concerned about it anymore. There's always going to be some, of course, that continue to not be happy about it, but that number definitely goes down dramatically.
What is the safety concern you hear most often about?
I guess the loudest ones are the people that talk about it's going to change your DNA, or it's 5G is going to change your DNA, or it causes COVID and things like that. Those are the loudest ones, but it's a very small number of people that are very vocal, I would say. It's interesting. I've done open houses around the province on this, and each time I go to one, there's a new thing comes up. But some people are worried about them falling over. Some are worried about again this 5G technology and things like that. But there's a variety of things, but typically they're not scientifically founded.
That was going to be my next question. Is there evidence that 5G affects the DNA?
None. Like I say, that we're using the same radio frequencies that radio stations used to use, and we're transmitting on those same radio frequencies. So there's really no difference. In fact, our transmit power is like 20 or 40 watts. I remember when I was younger seeing radio stations basically advertising that they were 100,000 watts that they were transmitting at. They were this is our power. How powerful our signal is, 100,000 watts. Well, we're at 20 or 40 watts. So it's like I say, it's not scientifically founded.
Thank you. And just want to close off just again, and I believe I've asked the question, I'm just going to confirm it. If we approve this today, you go do public consultation, builds don't happen until it comes back to council for concurrence to actually go ahead and build based upon review of that public consultation.
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. So just checking. Okay, so I will thank you for addressing Executive Committee and ask you to return to the gallery.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
We will now consider item EX 22-48, Sastel Cell Towers option to sell land. Can I ask Barry Lacey from administration to introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So I think the delegation has, really explained the need for why they have this request of the city, and it's relating to them undertaking a modernization of their wireless network, particularly with respect to the implementation of 5G cell towers throughout the city. And so they've requested option to purchase agreements on 4 parcels of city land with respect to 4 new cell towers. This report's before council because that sale would be occurring without a public offering, and any sale of city land without public offering is required to come here before council. I think there'll be an opportunity here to dive into questions a little bit more in depth, and I will certainly be referring questions to the city solicitor's office with respect to some of the technicalities around the federal legislation on how this process works. I do note the delegation has indicated that before council today is the decision to sell the land, but then after the consultation process happens, there's another approval process where it comes back to city council. And it'd be my view, and although I might, as we get into the question piece, ask the city solicitor to provide additional comments, once the sale of the land and an option agreement's in place, unless there's specific conditions attached to it, I believe, then the whole consultation process becomes a federal process, which is regulated by a federal process. So yes, part of that process is they do have to come back to the municipality through the planning area of the city, seeking comment and approval, but ultimately, even if the city objected, that I think ultimately, we'd either have to rely on SaskTel to honor the comments that were made here with respect to them they wouldn't proceed with the cell tower, or the federal government to make the decision not to allow a cell tower to proceed should they decide to proceed even with city objection through the planning process. Cell tower location is a permitted use on all land designations across the city. So typically these things have not come back to council for a conversation. So that would be a change in previous process. So, I think through this conversation, I think the most ability the city has right now is on the sale of the land with respect to, if there are concerns, having that conversation now would be my perspective, but I would welcome any comments as we get into the discussion here from the city's solicitor's office or from our folks in our real estate branch. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask someone to move the report. Councillor Hawkins, I see that your hand is raised. Would you like to move this report? Okay, I'll just ask for someone to move it then. Okay, Councillor LeBlanc. I'll let you start then with your questions.
Thank you. I have no substantive comment, but maybe a question for administration. I see that this is before council because the land sale isn't going to public offering, but it is offered at market rate. Two related questions, I suppose. One is, if this passes, how long does SaskTel have to exercise the option to purpose? And relatedly, how long does the agreed to market rate remain in effect? Let's say it happens 2 years down the road. Do we reassess market rate at that time? Through you, Madam Chair.
Chair, I'll ask Mr. Krawchuk to confirm the term of the option agreement and then the related financial term.
Thank you. Mr. Krawchuk?
Through the chair, the option agreement allows SaskTel to take up to 1 year to exercise the option. After that point in time, the option would essentially collapse, go away. They would have to come back and renegotiate a new agreement if they so desired.
I suppose just by way of brief comment, I'm inclined to support the administration's recommendation that we do this. I say that on two grounds. One, I think that delegation quite persuasively indicated that there's sort of a public good to having enhanced internet in Regina, and they need to be close to the houses they're serving in order to provide that. So that makes good sense to me. I'm inclined that way. And then the second is the comment which came out of Mayor Masters' question regarding that City Council will have sort of another opportunity to look at this if we so desire. So I'm inclined to support that, although admittedly, I could be dissuaded from that position, but that's where I'm at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Hawkins next. Councillor Hawkins, please go ahead. Councillor Hawkins, if you're speaking, you're on mute and we can't hear you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I attempted to put a motion on the floor to refer this matter back to the city so that consultations could take place. I'm not sure where you are in the procedure of this. Right now, I think there may be no motion on the floor, and in which case I want to move my referral motion.
Okay, so currently there's a concurrence motion. If you'd like to move a referral motion, if you could just give more clarity on that motion.
Who moved the concurrence motion?
Councillor LeBlanc.
I moved the referral matter before he moved the referral.
I think your microphone was muted.
It's possible. In that case, I'm going to move a referral motion. I'm going to make a couple of comments. You may wish to hold a referral motion so that others have a chance to make the comments, but I'm going to move the referral motion in any event at some point. The mayor asked critically important questions, and Mr. Lacey gave critically important answers to those questions. The reality here, because of the way the process is structured, this may be our only chance at council to consider the fundamental issue. Once we give the option to purchase, it's possible that the matter, as Mr. Lacey has pointed out, will move out of our hands altogether. It's possible it won't even come back. That said, I'd like to say what I think the critical issue is here. Nobody can possibly object to 5G or the advantages that it will bring. And indeed, the SaskTel representatives failed to mention that in the next few years, we'll have autonomous vehicles that will rely on 5G networks as well. So the issue is not whether or not we get 5G. The issue is where we put these terribly ugly towers. And that's where we, as councillors, have a choice. We could say no, not on parkland, which will force SaskTel and indeed the federal government to say, well, are there other options? And indeed, we know there are other options. In the case of the Harbor Landing cell tower location, which is the one I know best, you could put it on, you could take away a few parking spaces from a commercial development. They'd be expropriated likely. There'd have to be fair compensation, but you could do that. I don't see why taking parkland, municipal reserve parkland in the city, which is so precious, which everybody seems to be grabbing at, has some kind of priority over parking spaces. If you ask me, I think parkland may be more precious than a little bit of parking space. So there's a really fundamental issue that councils here and in other cities have to grapple with, but we can't grapple with it if the process as described in response to the mayor's questions gets going, because we get moved onto a side track. The main track is we're going to, we prefer to take the public city land. I don't know why the public land is considered by SaskTel more available than private land like parking spaces. So for that reason, I think that before I can make an intelligent decision on this, I need to have some input from the public. And in this case, especially some input from the school board, not the general kind of reaction that was described today, but specifically, I want to know whether these separate and public school boards in connection with the school in Harbor Landing want this cell phone in their backyard, taking away parkland, a little bit of parkland up against a hockey rink. Is that really the best place for this structure? In other words, I think that the investigation which SaskTel conducts has to be conducted with a little bit more open perspective than saying, well, we don't like to disturb private property. I don't like to disturb it either. But when faced with a choice as a councillor between protecting parkland, which is so limited in connection with our schools, limited in connection with population density in Harbour Landing, I'm going to be very slow to put a cell phone tower there when I could put it in a parking lot. So I'm moving this referral motion, and when it comes time for council to vote, I'd ask them to support us so that we can get before us the results of the very investigations, which are said to be coming later, perhaps. Maybe we can react again, probably not. So I think we need the investigation first, then the decision, not the other way around. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bresciani had her hand raised prior to this referral motion. Councillor Bresciani, are you wanting to make comments, or do we proceed with? Referral motions or not? Okay, it sounds like we'll proceed with the referral motion. Sorry, that's what I've been advised to do. Sorry, Councillor Bresciani.
Councillor Hawkins did offer that if people wanted to speak, though.
Yeah, well. Okay, so then we will, so going back to what I had originally, sure, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with the referral for the points that Councillor Hawkins has raised, but also the due diligence that we also need to ensure that when we are looking, I would agree, no one disagrees with we need 5G in all areas, but I want to go back to a report, and I'm going to ask the city clerk. When we had these other cell towers come forward, I had asked, and other councillors had asked, for a review of how do we decide a policy on where these cell towers go. Many cities have these. Can I ask the clerk, did we ever get anything like that through the chair?
Sorry.
And it was RPC 10-5 and RPC 15-31. But is there any recollection of that?
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Bresciani, if you could repeat your question. I was having a side conversation here and I missed your question. I apologize.
RPC 15-31, we had asked administration to conduct a review policy related to the sale of parcels of the city land for installation of cell towers, including the size of the parcel, related setbacks, as well as any bylaw changes that might have to occur. Do we know if that report ever came forward and a policy was ever developed through the chair?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have that information on hand. I could look that information up. We'd have to, my apologies. I will refer that to Ms. Bryden.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So we are in the process. We have developed a draft protocol, and we're in the process. It's not finalized yet, but we are working on that protocol, and we will be moving into some public engagement and engagement with council very shortly.
Thank you. So again, the whole purpose of this referral, I will support it for that reason, because that was the reason the council, and this was done in 2021, that we had asked for a report, because we are always cited with these types of questions around cell towers, as we know they're coming more. So I absolutely support this for that reason. The second piece I want to add is the one in one of the areas, one's a school, the other one is environmental reserve. Now, environmental reserve is needed to be protected. And when we look at that, I mean, we can look at many options, but as Councillor Hawkins said, it's the location. We're not saying no, but it's the location. Environmental reserve is there for habitat. It's there for people to enjoy walking past and that kind of thing. So when we go and we take that away, we lose that. So again, I think we have to be very, very careful about where these are located. So it's important that that report come back, as well as then we would guide us as well as making these decisions, looking at especially these 4. And as our city grows, there will be more to come. So I would absolutely support the referral.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bresciani. And next we have Councillor LeBlanc.
Just a point of order or clarification on the referral motion under 20 sub 15 of the procedure bylaw. I'm just looking, what meeting is it being proposed we adjourn this to or refer this to, and what work is to happen in the meantime? Just seeking clarification on that from the mover.
Councillor Bresciani, or sorry, Councillor Hawkins.
This is being referred back so that a public consultation of some kind, notification to the public and a consultation of some kind can take place. Whether or not SaskTel does it, or the city does it, or the 2 of them do it, I can't decide. I don't need to decide right now, but I do think we need to have some input from the public, and I especially include the school boards in the case of the Harbor Landing proposal as well. So it's really a referral back so that some kind of public input could be had by the stakeholders, so that council knows whether it prefers park lands to parking lots, basically.
Thank you. And just one further clarification piece, Councillor Hawkins, will this be referred to a specific meeting of executive committee, or that administration would bring it back when they deem sufficient consultation has occurred?
I don't control the agenda of the executive committee or council, so in the end that has to be the executive leadership team that can decide when it to be brought back. I mean, if you want a specific date, I could put a specific date on it, but I think the real date is when these consultations have been designed and can take place.
Thank you.
I don't imagine it needs to be that lengthy, but some consultation has to take place.
Just to respond to that, I'm hearing that it would be referred back to a future meeting once the consultation has occurred.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fundura, I also see your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question on the referral. I'm hearing from administration that the main motion passes, this will come back to us. So I'm not sure if there is circumnavigating the what the process is supposed to be in here. Am I correct on that? That regardless how we look at this, referral, no referral, that this will come back here, and before the tower gets built, we will have a decision. So are we doubling on our effort for consultation and all that, or what's happening here with the referral and the main? Madam Chair?
Well, Madam Chair, in fact, the administration said the exact opposite, that there was a distinct possibility it would never come back to us.
It looks like Mr. Lacey would like to take that one.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to make a few comments, and I'm going to ask Mr. Weary to add further comment. So I like to think about this being in two decision pieces. So one piece is the sale of the land, or council agreeing to option the land to SaskTel. So that's one decision that's totally within council's approval process. And from my perspective, there's no outside rules, regulations that council needs to take into. That's entirely within council's purview. Once a cell tower provider, such as SaskTel, has land or has an option to acquire land, then they're required under federal legislation to embark upon a consultation process. Part of that consultation process improves seeking input and agreement from the municipality. This has happened in past cell tower leases or sales that we've made, which has been handled at an administrative level. Once again, I would point out that land designation, cell tower usage is a permitted use on any land designation within the city. So the point I was making here is once the land is sold or comes under option, then it becomes a federal regulated process with respect to the consultation. And ultimately, it's the federal government that makes the decision about whether or not a permit is issued for that cell tower to be constructed. So even if the city, and I'm just putting it out there, and I'll ask Mr. Weary to confirm this, that even if residents objected, worst case scenario, even if the city indicated concerns later with that, but SaskTel felt it was really important to build that tower, that would ultimately that resolution of that would be at the federal level through a federal process. Now, we did hear from the delegation that there was objections, they would honor that, right? So I do want to let council know that SaskTel has indicated they'd honor the city's views on that piece. But what I'm pointing out here is technically, legally, once the land is sold, I believe that becomes a federal process, and technically, the city doesn't have final say after that. Mr. Weary, could you add additional comment on perhaps the federal process around cell towers and responsibilities?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lacey's correctly described the process at a high level. It is contained in federal policy that I think the delegation made some reference to in their submissions to council. The process would allow for the city to make further representations to the federal regulator, and the federal regulator could in turn make a decision based on the municipal position on this. I think we also heard SaskTel say if there was significant municipal opposition to this, they likely would not proceed with the federal regulatory process in any event. There's also a dispute resolution process contained in the federal process. So this is not something that I believe the city has embarked on before when these types of approvals have come forward, but it's certainly provided for in the federal legislation and policy.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Nicol would also like to say something. I will turn on your mic.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just further to what Mr. Lacey and Mr. Weary have said, and I'm only speculating here, but if Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Bresciani had significant or have significant concerns with respect to the proposed location of the cell towers, one in on is it Aerodrome and the other in the Creeks, we believe that you do have the option to move a motion that would proceed with the other two. I mean, this is the opportunity. This is where council really has its input, is to say, no, we don't want them there. We want SaskTel to go back and look at these things. That would be a way to move two of them forward. And if you feel that you're not going to proceed with the other two, then say so now. I'm only putting that out there for something to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol. Councillor Findura, you have more?
I'm good. No, thank you.
And Mayor Masters, I see you have a question as well.
Thank you, through the chair. In terms of the legality of it, why do cell towers become a federal regulated process, Mr. Weary? Do you have the rationale behind that?
It's just a division of powers within the Constitution of Canada. So because cellular, it's a federal undertaking, so it's within the constitutional authority of the federal government.
And in terms of what I heard from the delegation was that they would be seeking concurrence from the city in the future. Do you have examples or of municipalities who have disagreed where towers have been built in absence or in the presence of their objection?
I'm not aware of any, but I've not done extensive research on this topic. But reading the federal policy, it still remains the federal regulator's decision on how to proceed. But in my view, if there is significant opposition from a municipality, I think the delegation from SaskTel said that they would give weight to that, and I believe that the federal regulator would also give weight to it. But again, ultimately, it is their decision how to proceed, and it would be SaskTel's decision whether to seek approval from the regulator. So there's two steps in between, but the city does have a right and to make its views known on this particular area of location of cell towers or existence of cell towers within its boundaries. But it ultimately is, in terms of land acquisition, as Councillor Hawkins has alluded to and as was discussed by the delegation, there is power to expropriate within their provincial legislation. And then once, if that was ever to be exercised, then there would be still the opportunity for the municipality to register any objections that it had with the location of cell towers that SaskTel might decide to proceed with.
I'm aware of all types of powers, sir. Thank you very much. Through the chair, we have the power to expropriate as well. Why don't we talk about how long and how much that costs as to the actual viability of it ever occurring?
Well, the expropriation power, as long as it's for a proper purpose, that is a step that can be taken fairly summarily, subject to notice that it's going to happen. And then the main discussion is around compensation for the expropriated lands. And so that would be a negotiation. And if it's not resolved by negotiation, then there is a expropriation tribunal that will set the value of compensation. So it is an administrative tribunal process, so it would take some time. But municipal expropriation is not something that the city has undertaken in my time as city solicitor. So it's a power that's very rarely used by the city of Regina.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see no further hands raised, so I think we're going to call the vote on the referral motion.
Through you, Madam Chair, the motion carries with 4 voting in favor and 3 voting against. The following voting in favor, Councillors Hawkins, Bresciani, Stevens, and Zakidniak, and the following voting against, Councillors Findura, LeBlanc, and Mayor Masters.
Thank you. We'll now move on to report EX 22-49. We have a delegation for this. I just need to check to see if they are on the line. Okay. So I'm calling upon delegation Jeff Janssens. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you are representing, if any, and where you live. You have 5 minutes to address Executive Committee, after which you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that the members may have for you. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, it's Jeff Jansen with McAsphalt Industries. I'm based out of Winnipeg, but I represent our facility on Arcola Street there in Regina. Honestly, I didn't have anything prepared. I was just asked to join the meeting in case you guys had any questions of me regarding the lease renewal for the next 10 years. Yeah, we've been there since 1950 something, I believe. It's had several owners before us. McAsphalt, I think, bought it in the mid 90s. So yeah, if there's anything outside of what I provided in the email that you guys had questions of, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I will ask if any members have questions for the delegation, and I do see Councillor Bresciani that your hand is raised, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much for appearing. I just, in regards to cleaning up the site, so this is for 10 years. It says in regards to, there may be a possibility that we want to widen our COLA. What is the notice that you would need to clear, I guess, to be able to get the site ready, to get everything off? And I don't know what the right wording is. I had it highlighted here, but to making sure it's clean. Through the chair.
At the risk of sounding like I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, the word
at the risk
was
of sounding like I'm deferring.
environmental remediation.
We'd have to get. I can check with my head office in Toronto. I'm not sure if they have a formal quote from an environmental cleanup company or something. Eventually, yes, when you guys either kick us off the land or we choose to move because we find a different facility, that would be for sure part of the process, I imagine. But how long that would take, I'd have to look into it, and I could definitely get back to you. We do have containment on site, obviously. All our tanks, should there ever be a leak, it's contained and controlled. But you're right. I mean, those storage tanks have been there for years. They're constantly maintained. We do have an engineering crew that does, for all our facilities, does regular maintenance and checkups and preventative maintenance on all our tanks. And if they feel that they're getting thin or there's any sort of issues with them, then they are taken offline and brought up to code and fixed and repaired. But even with all those best intentions, for sure, there's going to be some spot areas that I'm sure need soil remediation. But I can't comment specifically to how long that would take to clean up should we leave that property.
Okay, so I guess just an understanding that we can give a notification within 1 year to say that we now are going to be moving on with expanding our COLA or doing a beautification and having you move into the industrial area where you probably should be. But I guess the question is that's the, I guess one of the concerns is, what is the time? So is it a 2 year? Is it a 3 year? Is it a 4 year remediation? I guess that's the, and then that would be expected to be done at your cost. Is that correct?
Well, that I don't know either. Actually, I'd have to talk with the with head office to see what we have in the fine print of the lease agreement. I did read it, and to be honest, I don't remember seeing anything specifically as to whose responsibility that was, but I would assume it would be ours. And then, again, anything can be done quicker with more money or manpower, but again, I don't know the environmental regulations as far as, and I'm going just on experience with seeing gas stations or whatever that have been closed down. Oftentimes I notice that they do some cleanup, they move soil around, but then it actually has to sit vacant for a while, right? Because and again, I don't know, I'm not an environmental engineer, but I would guess that's part of the remediation, is just actually allowing it to breathe and and age and sort of naturally clean after removing the soil that's been contaminated. So these are great questions. I mean, I can definitely look into it and email you guys back with some answers. Yeah.
No, that's fine. No problem. I will ask administration those. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm just looking to see if there's any further questions. I don't see any. So thank you for addressing Executive Committee, and you may leave the meeting now.
Okay, great. Thanks. Have a good day.
So we will now consider item EX 22-49, McAsphalt Industries lease renewal at 600 Arcola Avenue. Can I ask Barry Lacey from administration to introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. McAsphalt Industries operates, as the delegation noted, an asphalt business out of 600 Arcola Avenue, which they've leased from the city since 1998, when they took over that facility from a previous asphalt company. And that facility has been run actually by 4 different owners since 1952. So it's been at that location for over 50 years. And over those years, since they bought it, McAsphalt has made substantial investments in the plant, with which is currently the main contributor to TAC emulsions to the city's annual paving program. And as well, they serve a significant amount of customers in rural Saskatchewan. The current lease expires on April 30th of 2022. They wish to renew the lease. And again, as this property is not being offered publicly, council approval is required. I'd just make a couple of other comments. I know there was a question asked to the delegate with respect to remediation of the site once that company moves. Under the current lease agreement, responsibility for remediation of that site to it being remediated resides with the company. The costs of doing the remediation reside with the company, and any future lease renewals would continue to have that clause in that lease, that remediation would be the responsibility of the company. I would note as well, the recommendation is for a 10-year lease here. The 10-year lease is because the city has no projected use of that land within the next 10 years. As a result, we are recommending a 10-year lease. The option agreement does talk about a shorter lease term if council desired. Administration's not recommending that because that's not immediately required. One of the things we wanted to balance is moving that plant would be a substantial cost to that company. From an economic perspective, council before has talked to administration about wanting to make the city business friendly. Given there's not an immediate need to move that plant, our recommendation is to renew that lease again for the next 10 years. And we will revisit that at the end of the 10-year lease, as the city does not have use for that land over the next 10 years. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Can I get someone to move the report? Councillor Findura. Do you have questions? Okay, I'll turn your mic on.
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Lacey did answer a question I had about needing the area and the length of time. So I have no objections. City administration has developed a good plan moving forward. We've dealt with this in my tenure once before. I'm satisfied with what's in the report, how even the remediation, as the delegation did talked about a little bit, and transitioning. So it's an expensive move. So I'm satisfied with what's in the report and how this is moving forward. So I'm in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Findura. I see Councillor Brasciani, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. For city administration, why would we wait so long? So here we are. This is they've been there 1998, and and we're renewing the lease now. It's going to expire on April 30th. Today is April 13th. What is our process for renewing lease? This is not the first time we've come across this. So, I mean, is it common practice that like a week and a half or 2 weeks before it's going to expire that we bring this forward for our decision?
So through you, Mayor Masters, through you, Madam Chair, I will make a couple of comments and then ask Mr. Krawchuk for additional comment and detail. So typically in leases like this, if a lease expires, it continues to carry forward until a new lease agreement is signed. And so from that perspective, we consider that risk to be relatively low. But with respect to the particulars about why we're coming forward here in April when the lease expires this month, I'll just ask Mr. Krawchuk if he has any additional information to provide.
Through the chair, our typical process is to start this 6 months out from the expiration of the lease. It seems that we're going to have to adjust that probably to 9 months, as the time to complete all of the work that's required does sometimes put us in front of council very close to the expiry date. So we will take that back and start working earlier on the leases in order to get them to you in a few months prior to the actual expiration of the lease.
Thank you very much for that. In regards to the 10-year lease that we're suggesting here, in regards to the remediation, what is the consultation process? So in 10 years, so prior to that, it's going to take some time, obviously. The land may have to sit. What is the process from the city's point to say we may have to reach out in 5 years to say, okay, in year 10, we are going to look at expanding our COLA or looking at those. What is the process? Because there's going to be, I don't want it to come to 10 years, we're in our 10th year, and then we say, oh, and they come back and say, well, listen, we still have to remediate the site and all that. So how do we mitigate that risk? Through the chair, through this policy.
Mr. Lacey?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll ask Mr. Krawchuk to explain the process that would be undertaken.
So with a 10-year lease, they would have possession of the land for the full 10 years. And when the 10-year lease expires, they would begin the remediation process. I can't speak to the length of time that would take. I expect they would do a phase 2 environmental. Again, I don't want to jump on what the particular process may be, but they would undertake the requirements of the lease to remediate the property to a commercial standard of use. So the time that it takes to do that, my understanding is that also the work to complete the design and implementation of what our COLA would be would take at least a year. So I believe that we have the time frame there to allow them to complete the remediation work while the work on what's happening to our COLA would take place as well.
Thank you. So then, from your understanding or administration's understanding, to remediate the site, it would only take a year then?
Through the chair, I can't speak to the actual time. It would be determined by the state of the land at the time that they need to start the remediation. So once the work begins on determining the level of contamination and the requirements for the remediation, that would determine the time frame. I don't know if Ms. Wellman could speak to the potential time frames involved.
Through the chair, the timeframes would be dependent on the phase 2 that would have to be done for the reclamation work to proceed. So we wouldn't know until that work was done by McAsphalt.
So it could be longer than that, depending on what is needed at that site. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask the administration, what is the plans for expansion on Arcola Avenue as we look to beautify our city? I would say that I think we can all agree that this would be some type of an industrial type of business. What is the thought of in this within this 10-year window? What is the number one, looking at Arcola and the expansion and removal of some of these businesses, such as we're doing on Sass Drive? Where is that at? And then number two, if this is still needed, is there something within the city where we assist this business to relocate into the industrial area? Through the chair.
Mr. Lacey?
So through you, Madam Chair, just for a clarification point, I'll ask Mr. Onright to answer that question, but my understanding is expansion of this roadway is beyond a 10-year horizon. So this lease proposal is well within the timeline before any type of expansion occurs under current planning. But I'll ask Mr. Onright to expand.
Thank you. Mr. Onright?
Thank you, through the chair. So currently there's work being done on Sass Drive. That is the next piece of work after 11th Avenue that will be done, along with the Dudney Avenue work. Arcola Avenue is further out than that, and that's why administration is okay with the 10-year lease. There's also an out clause, from my understanding, within that 10-year period. So be it that in 5 years it was determined that work was going to advance sooner than later, then we would work with the business owner to make sure they have adequate time to be able to move their business, clean up the site, and prepare it for the next piece of expansion work on Arcola. And I see Ms. Gasmo on the call. I would ask Karen to add her comments.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gasmo, go ahead.
Through the chair, not really anything to add to what Mr. Onright has already said. It's not currently within the 10-year horizon. However, if something were to change, we would probably then look at if the clause within the lease agreement could be exercised.
Thank you. Councillor Brosciani?
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I also see Councillor Hawkins. You have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just have one question, a technical question for the administration. With respect to the remediation clause, is the remediation clause backed by any kind of bond or any kind of surety which will guarantee that the work will get done? I'm thinking of a case where perhaps a company is flipped or a company goes bankrupt. Is there any protection against that situation?
Mr. Lacey?
I'll refer that question to Mr. Krawchuk.
Okay, Mr. Krawchuk, go ahead.
Through the chair, it is simply a term of the lease, and I might ask the city solicitor to weigh in on how that might be enforced should the lessee not comply.
Thank you. Go ahead, please, Mr. Weary.
Madam Chair, it's my understanding there isn't a security for payment of remediation costs. There is a specific process in the lease that would allow the city to remediate and charge the costs of that plus a 10% top up back to the lessee.
Okay, Councillor Hawkins, go ahead.
So just to follow up on that, if the company goes bankrupt, the city would have no recall at that point.
Mr. Weary, go ahead.
Would be subject to the bankruptcy process, correct?
Just a very brief comment. With this kind of lease going forward into the future, and bearing in mind the trouble we've had with abandoned properties, we might consider whether or not we want to take some kind of bond or surety that would protect us should the company go bankrupt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I see no further hands. So we'll call to question. Can I get the clerk to call the vote, please?
Through you, Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously with all 7 members voting in favor.
Thank you. Can I get a resolution for a private session, please? Councillor.
Madam Chair, just before we do that, just a procedural question for those of us who are online. Do we sign out and sign back in, or how do we proceed technologically?
No, you can just stay on the line.
Thank you.
So Councillor Findura gave a resolution. Any opposed? Okay.